The rain hammered Fort Braxton like artillery fire, each drop exploding against the concrete with the fury of nature unleashed. Through the storm, a figure emerged from the passenger seat of a mud-splattered jeep, moving with deliberate precision. Despite the chaos overhead, Captain Elena Rodriguez stepped onto the parade ground, her boots finding purchase on the slick surface as thunder rolled across the North Carolina mountains like distant cannon fire. She carried herself with an economy of movement that spoke of someone who understood that every gesture mattered, every step calculated. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her uniform bore the creases of someone who had slept in vehicles and makeshift shelters, yet somehow maintained the bearing of a professional soldier. Dark hair pulled back in regulation style, her face weathered by sun and wind in ways that suggested extensive field time rather than garrison duty. The massive concrete structure of the 3rd Infantry Battalion headquarters loomed before her, its brutalist architecture designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Steam rose from the heated building into the cold morning air, creating ghostly wisps that danced between the American flag and the battalion colors whipping violently in the storm. Elena paused for a moment, studying the building like a chess player contemplating an opponent's position. Inside those walls waited Colonel James Harrison, a man whose reputation preceded him like the bow wave of a destroyer. 28 years of service, 3 combat deployments, and an ego that had grown with each promotion until it filled rooms before he entered them. Harrison ran the 3rd Battalion like his personal kingdom, surrounded by officers who had learned that agreement was safer than excellence, that conformity was rewarded while innovation was punished. Elena had heard the stories during her drive from Fort Leavenworth. How Harrison dismissed female officers as diversity hires, how he believed combat leadership was a man's domain, how he treated women in his command like temporary inconveniences to be managed rather than soldiers to be led. The stories painted a picture of institutional prejudice wrapped in old-school military tradition, a fossil from an era when the armed forces looked very different. But Elena Rodriguez carried her own stories, ones that remained classified in Pentagon filing cabinets and redacted after-action reports. Stories of villages saved and missions accomplished, of soldiers brought home alive from places where survival seemed impossible. Stories that would never be told in officers' clubs or written in official histories, because the best operations were the ones that never officially happened. She adjusted her field jacket against the driving rain and walked toward the entrance, each step carrying her deeper into what would become either validation or professional destruction. The guard at the entrance snapped to attention, his young face showing the nervous energy of a soldier who recognized tension in the air, even when he couldn't identify its source. Elena returned his salute with crisp precision, noting how his eyes lingered on her captain's bars with barely concealed curiosity. The interior of the headquarters building struck her immediately with its sterile functionality. Polished floors reflected fluorescent lights that buzzed with mechanical persistence, while motivational posters featuring military, aircraft, and inspiring quotes competed for wall space with official photographs of the chain of command, the scent of industrial cleaner mixed with coffee, and the particular smell of large institutions everywhere. That combination of bureaucracy and human ambition that marked places where careers were made and broken. Elena made her way through corridors lined with office doors, each bearing nameplates that told stories of rank and position. Majors and lieutenant colonels, staff officers and administrators, the machinery of military bureaucracy that kept the actual fighting force supplied, trained, and ready. She noted the glances from officers emerging from offices, the way conversations paused as she passed, the subtle shift in atmosphere that accompanied an outsider's arrival in an established hierarchy. The reception area outside Colonel Harrison's office reflected the man's personality with uncomfortable clarity. Photographs covered every available surface, showing Harrison with various dignitaries, politicians, and senior military leaders. Awards and commendations filled a display case that dominated one wall, each citation positioned for maximum visibility. The message was unmistakable. This was a man who valued recognition and understood the importance of appearances in military career advancement. Staff Sergeant Monica Chun sat behind the reception desk, her fingers dancing across a keyboard with the efficiency of someone who had mastered the art of military administration. She looked up as Elena approached, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes carrying the alertness of a soldier who had learned to read situations quickly. Elena noticed the slight tightening around Chun's eyes, the way her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, suggesting she had witnessed enough interactions in this office to recognize when tension was building. "Captain Rodriguez reporting to Colonel Harrison," Elena said, her voice carrying the formal cadence of military protocol, while maintaining an undertone of quiet confidence. She placed her orders on the desk with movements that suggested familiarity, with the ritual of checking into new assignments, yet something in her manner indicated this was far from a routine transfer. Chun examined the paperwork with the thoroughness of someone who understood that details mattered in the military bureaucracy. Her eyes widened slightly as she read certain sections, though she maintained her professional composure. Elena watched the staff sergeant's reaction, noting the moment when routine processing became something more significant. The orders carried classifications and endorsements that suggested Elena Rodriguez was not the typical staff officer rotation that Harrison usually received. "The colonel is in a meeting with the battalion staff," Chun said, her voice carefully neutral. "He should be available shortly. Please have a seat, ma'am." She gestured toward a row of chairs positioned against the wall. "They're uncomfortable," design suggesting they were meant to remind visitors of their subordinate status rather than provide actual comfort. Elena settled into one of the chairs, her posture remaining alert despite the casual positioning. She used the waiting time to study her surroundings more carefully, reading the room like an intelligence analyst examining enemy territory. The photographs told stories of a career built on connections and political awareness, while the awards suggested competence without exceptional achievement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Everything in the office spoke of a man who understood how to navigate military hierarchy, but might struggle when faced with situations that couldn't be managed through traditional channels. The sound of voices grew louder behind the closed door of Harrison's office, though Elena couldn't make out specific words through the heavy wood and institutional soundproofing. She could distinguish multiple speakers, the rise and fall of discussion that suggested a briefing or planning session in progress. Occasionally, one voice would dominate the others, speaking with the confidence of someone accustomed to having the final word in most conversations. Chun glanced up from her computer screen periodically, her expression suggesting she was familiar with the dynamics playing out in the adjacent office. Elena caught her eye during one of these glances and offered a slight smile, the kind of professional acknowledgement that passed between soldiers who understood the complexities of military life. Chun returned the gesture with subtle warmth, though her manner remained appropriately formal given the setting. The office door opened with sudden force, revealing Colonel Harrison in conversation with 3 other officers. Elena's first impression was of a man who filled space through presence rather than physical size, though he was imposing enough in purely physical terms. Harrison stood just over 6 feet tall, his frame carrying the solid build of someone who had maintained military fitness standards throughout a long career. His hair showed distinguished gray at the temples, and his uniform bore the precise creases that spoke of attention to detail and personal pride in appearance. But it was Harrison's manner that truly dominated the space. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never seriously questioned his own authority, gesturing expansively as he made points to his subordinates. His voice carried the particular cadence of military leadership, that combination of command presence and institutional authority that could compel obedience even when respect was absent. Elena watched him interact with his staff, noting how they positioned themselves in relation to their commander, the subtle body language that indicated their place in the established hierarchy. The 3 officers with Harrison appeared to be his primary staff, a major who carried himself with the nervous energy of someone perpetually concerned about meeting expectations, a lieutenant colonel whose weathered face suggested extensive field experience, and another major whose demeanor indicated responsibility for administrative functions. Elena observed their interactions with professional interest, reading the group dynamics that would affect her own integration into the battalion structure. "Make sure the training schedule reflects our priorities," Harrison was saying as the group prepared to disperse. "I want those companies pushed hard on basic skills before we worry about any fancy tactical innovations. These soldiers need discipline and fundamental competence, not experimental approaches that look good in PowerPoint presentations, but fall apart under pressure." The officers nodded their agreement with the practice synchronization of subordinates who had learned that enthusiasm. For their commander's directives was expected regardless of their personal opinions. Elena noted the subtle resignation in their expressions, suggesting this was a familiar refrain rather than a new policy direction. She filed the observation away as potentially relevant information about the command climate she was entering. Harrison's gaze swept across the reception area as his staff filed out, his eyes settling on Elena with the practiced assessment of a senior officer encountering an unfamiliar subordinate. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of subtle change that indicated internal calculations being made about how to categorize and manage this new element in his organization. Elena rose from her chair with fluid precision, coming to attention with the crisp movements that reflected years of military training and discipline. "Colonel Harrison, Captain Elena Rodriguez reporting for duty, sir," she said, her voice carrying the formal respect required by military protocol, while maintaining an undertone of quiet confidence that suggested she was far from intimidated by the situation. She extended her orders with movements that were both respectful and economical, avoiding any gesture that might be interpreted as either submissive or challenging. Harrison accepted the paperwork with the casual authority of someone accustomed to processing the careers and assignments of subordinates. Elena watched his face as he read, noting the moment when routine administrative processing shifted to something more complex. His eyebrows rose slightly as he encountered certain classifications and endorsements, though he maintained the poker face that senior military officers developed through years of practice at concealing their reactions to unexpected information. "Fort Leavenworth," Harrison said, his tone carrying implications that Elena couldn't quite decipher. "Command and General Staff College. Top 10% of your class." He continued reading, his expression growing more thoughtful as he processed information that apparently contradicted his initial assumptions about this assignment. Previous assignments include interesting selections for a captain. Elena remained at attention while Harrison processed her records, though she noted the shift in his demeanor as he encountered information that didn't fit his preconceived notions. The silence stretched between them, filled with the subtle tension of 2 military professionals taking each other's measure. Elena could hear the rain continuing to hammer against the building's windows, the storm outside providing an appropriate soundtrack for what was clearly becoming a more complex interaction than a routine check-in. "Your orders indicate assignment as executive officer for Alpha Company," Harrison said finally, his voice carefully neutral, though Elena detected undertones that suggested this assignment was not necessarily what he had expected or requested. "Captain Matthews has been serving in that capacity temporarily since Captain Wilson's transfer to Germany last month. I trust you're prepared to assume those responsibilities immediately." Elena nodded with professional composure, though she filed away the information about the previous executive officer's departure, and the temporary nature of Matthew's service in that role. Military assignments rarely occurred in complete isolation, and the circumstances surrounding her placement in this battalion were clearly more complex than a simple personnel rotation. She made a mental note to gather more information about the recent changes in the battalion's leadership structure when appropriate opportunities arose. "Yes, sir," Elena responded with the crisp acknowledgement that military protocol required. "I've reviewed the unit's current status and training schedule during my travel time. I'm prepared to integrate immediately and support Captain Foster's command priorities for Alpha Company." Harrison's expression shifted again, this time with what Elena interpreted as mild surprise that she had already familiarized herself with unit-specific information. The reaction suggested that such preparation was not necessarily common among officers reporting to his command, which told her something about either the quality of previous assignments or Harrison's expectations for his subordinates. She maintained her professional demeanor while mentally cataloging these observations for future reference. "Captain Foster is dedicated to his soldiers," Harrison said after a brief pause, his tone carrying implications that Elena couldn't fully interpret. Without additional context, Alpha Company has unique characteristics that require careful management. "I trust you understand the importance of maintaining discipline and supporting established command relationships within the battalion structure." The phrasing struck Elena as oddly specific, suggesting that her assignment involved considerations beyond typical personnel management. She nodded her understanding while making mental notes about the apparent complexity of the situation she was entering. Military euphemisms often concealed significant operational or personnel challenges, and Harrison's careful word choice indicated this assignment might involve navigating political or interpersonal dynamics that weren't immediately apparent. "Staff Sergeant Chun will arrange for your initial briefings and facility orientation," Harrison continued, his manner returning to the routine administrative tone that marked most personnel processing. "Report to Captain Foster at 0800 tomorrow morning. Alpha Company is currently conducting field training exercises, so be prepared for immediate integration into ongoing operations rather than a gradual introduction period." Elena acknowledged the instructions with another crisp nod, though she noted the implication that her integration would be immediate and potentially challenging. Field training exercises provided excellent opportunities to observe unit capabilities and leadership dynamics, but they also meant less time for careful relationship building and gradual acclimatization to new command structures. She welcomed the challenge while recognizing the additional complexity it would add to her situation assessment. Harrison returned her orders along with additional paperwork that she recognized as standard, processing documents for new assignments. His manner remained professionally correct, though Elena detected subtle undertones that suggested her presence represented something more significant than routine personnel management. She accepted the documents with appropriate military courtesy, while maintaining the alert awareness that had served her well throughout her career. "Dismissed, Captain," Harrison said with the finality that marked the conclusion of official business. Elena saluted with precise movements, held the position until Harrison returned the gesture, then executed a proper about-face and moved toward the exit. She was acutely aware of Harrison's continued attention as she left his office. The weight of assessment that suggested this initial interaction was being filed away for future reference and evaluation. Staff Sergeant Chun looked up from her computer as Elena approached the reception desk, her expression carrying professional helpfulness, mixed with what Elena interpreted as genuine interest in facilitating her successful integration into the battalion. Elena appreciated the staff sergeant's apparent competence and attention to detail, recognizing that effective administrative support would be crucial during her initial period of adjustment to the new assignment. "Captain Rodriguez, I have your temporary quarters assignment and base orientation materials," Chun said, producing a folder with the efficiency that marked experienced military administration. The housing office has prepared Bach Room 247 for your use until permanent arrangements can be made. The key is included along with post-facility information and contact numbers for essential services. Elena accepted the folder with appropriate gratitude while scanning its contents quickly. The bachelor officer's quarters assignment suggested that her stay might be temporary or that permanent housing options were limited, though she preferred the independence that temporary quarters provided during initial assignment periods. BOQ. Facilities also offered opportunities to interact with other officers in informal settings, which could provide valuable insights into unit dynamics and command climate. I've also included Alpha Company's current training schedule and contact information for key personnel. Chun continued, her voice carrying the helpful tone of someone who understood the challenges facing newly assigned officers. Captain Foster's company headquarters is located in Building 742, approximately a 10-minute walk from here. The company first sergeant is Master Sergeant Patricia Williams, and she typically arrives at the office around 07:30 each morning. Elena made mental notes about the key personnel information while appreciating Chun's thoroughness in providing essential details that would facilitate her smooth integration. The timing information suggested she would have opportunities to connect with both the company commander and first sergeant before the official 0800 reporting time that Harrison had specified. Building relationships with both commissioned and non-commissioned leadership would be crucial for her effectiveness in the executive officer role. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant Chun," Elena said with sincere appreciation for the administrative support. "Your assistance makes this transition much more manageable. Is there anything specific about the battalion or post that you think would be particularly important for me to understand as I get oriented?" Chun glanced toward Harrison's office, her expression momentarily thoughtful as she seemed to consider how much additional information would be appropriate to share. Elena recognized the careful calculation that experienced military personnel made when dealing with potentially sensitive topics, the balance between being helpful and maintaining professional discretion. She waited patiently, allowing Chun to make her own decision about what additional guidance might be beneficial. "The battalion has high standards and clear expectations," Chun said finally, her tone remaining professionally neutral while her eyes conveyed additional meaning that Elena couldn't quite decipher. "Colonel Harrison values discipline and traditional approaches to military operations. The company commanders are all experienced officers who understand the importance of maintaining unit cohesion and supporting established policies." Elena nodded her understanding while recognizing that Chun's careful phrasing contained layers of meaning that would become clearer as she gained more familiarity with the battalion's operational dynamics. Military organizations often develop their own cultures and unwritten rules that took time to understand fully, and Chun's diplomatic language suggested that navigating those dynamics would require careful attention and professional skill. "I appreciate the guidance," Elena responded with genuine warmth. "I look forward to contributing to the battalion's mission and supporting the soldiers in Alpha Company. Please don't hesitate to contact me if there's anything I can do to facilitate coordination or communication as I integrate into the team." Chun smiled with what Elena interpreted as genuine approval, suggesting that her approach to building relationships with support personnel was both noticed and appreciated. Elena understood that administrative staff often possessed insights and influence that were crucial for operational effectiveness, and she made it a practice to treat all military personnel with the respect and professionalism that their service deserved. Elena left the headquarters building with her orientation materials and temporary quarters assignment, stepping back into the storm that continued to rage across Fort Braxton. The rain had intensified during her time inside, transforming the parking areas into temporary lakes and turning the normally well-maintained grounds into muddy obstacle courses. She pulled her field jacket tighter against the driving precipitation, while navigating toward the Boca building that would serve as her temporary home. The walk gave her time to process her initial impressions of Colonel Harrison and the battalion. Headquarters environment. Harrison clearly ran a traditional military organization, with emphasis on hierarchy and established procedures, though Elena detected undertones that suggested the command climate might be more complex than surface appearances indicated. His careful assessment of her credentials and the specific language he had used regarding Alpha Company suggested that her assignment involved considerations beyond routine personnel management. Elena found Bach Room 247 without difficulty, the building's layout following standard military architecture that she had encountered at installations throughout her career. The room itself was functional rather than comfortable, containing the basic furnishings that marked temporary military housing: a single bed with regulation linens, a small desk and chair, a wall locker for uniform storage, and a window that looked out onto the storm-swept training areas where she would soon be working. She unpacked her essential items with the efficiency that came from years of temporary assignments and frequent relocations. Military life taught officers to travel light and adapt quickly to new environments, skills that Elena had developed to a high degree through her varied career experiences. As she arranged her uniforms and personal items, she reviewed her initial impressions and began formulating approaches for successful integration into Alpha Company's operations. The rain continued its assault on the window as Elena reviewed the company training schedule and personnel roster that Staff Sergeant Chun had provided. Alpha Company appeared to be a standard infantry unit with conventional organization and mission assignments, though Elena noted several indicators that suggested the unit might have capabilities or responsibilities that weren't immediately apparent. From routine documentation, she made mental notes about key personnel and planned her approach for building relationships with both commissioned and non-commissioned leadership. Captain Michael Foster commanded Alpha Company and his personnel. File indicated extensive combat experience with multiple deployments to challenging operational environments. Master Sergeant Patricia Williams served as Company First Sergeant, her record showing 22 years of service with expertise in training and soldier development. The combination suggested a leadership team with both operational experience and organizational competence, though Elena recognized that personnel files only told part of the story about leadership effectiveness and unit dynamics. Elena prepared for sleep while the storm continued to rage outside her window, the sound of rain and wind providing a constant reminder of the challenging environment she had entered. Tomorrow would bring her first opportunity to observe Alpha Company operations and begin building the relationships that would determine her effectiveness in the executive officer role. She understood that first impressions mattered significantly in military organizations, and she was determined to demonstrate the competence and professionalism that had characterized her career to this point. As she settled into the narrow BOQ bed, Elena reflected on the path that had brought her to Fort Braxton and this particular assignment. Her career had included challenges and opportunities that had tested her abilities and shaped her understanding of military leadership, though much of that experience remained classified and couldn't be discussed in conventional military settings. She carried knowledge and skills that extended far beyond what her official records indicated, expertise that might prove relevant depending on the situation she encountered in her new assignment. The storm outside began to subside gradually, though occasional gusts of wind and heavy rain continued to remind Elena of the volatile environment surrounding Fort Braxton. She understood that weather was just one of many variables that could affect military operations, and she had learned through experience that adaptability and preparation were essential for success in challenging environments. Tomorrow would reveal more about the specific challenges and opportunities that awaited her in Alpha Company. Elena drifted towards sleep with her mind still processing the day's events and preparing for the challenges ahead. She had encountered Colonel Harrison's traditional approach to military leadership and had been warned in diplomatic language about the battalion's emphasis on established procedures and hierarchy. Alpha Company appeared to be a competent unit with experienced leadership, though Elena recognized that organizational effectiveness depended on factors that weren't always apparent from initial observations. The transition to a new assignment always involved uncertainty and the need to prove oneself within established organizational structures. Elena had navigated similar challenges throughout her career, though each situation brought unique dynamics and requirements that demanded careful assessment and adaptive approaches. She was confident in her abilities while remaining appropriately humble about the complexities she might encounter in her new role. As sleep finally claimed her, Elena's last conscious thoughts focused on the soldiers of Alpha Company who would depend on her leadership and support in the executive officer role. Military service ultimately centered on the men and women who carried out missions and faced dangers in service to their country, and Elena understood that her effectiveness would be measured by her ability to support and enable their success. She was determined to live up to that responsibility, regardless of whatever challenges awaited her in the days ahead. The storm continued its gradual retreat across the North Carolina mountains, leaving behind the clean scent of rain-washed air and the promise of clearer skies ahead. Elena Rodriguez slept the sleep of a soldier accustomed to uncertainty and challenge, her mind already beginning to formulate the approaches and strategies that would serve her well in the complex environment she had entered. Tomorrow would mark the true beginning of her integration into Fort Braxton's 3rd Infantry Battalion, and she was ready to meet whatever tests awaited her professional competence and leadership abilities. Dawn broke over Fort Braxton with the crystalline clarity that follows violent storms. The air scrubbed clean and sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth. Elena Rodriguez emerged from the bachelor officers' quarters at precisely 0630, her uniform bearing the crisp precision that marked professional military bearing. The previous night's tempest had transformed the training grounds into a landscape of puddles and muddy patches, though the underlying infrastructure of the base remained solid and functional. She walked toward Building 742 with measured steps, her boots finding secure purchase on the rain-slicked pavement while she observed the gradual awakening of the military installation around her. Soldiers emerged from barracks buildings in various stages of morning preparation, their movements carrying the purposeful energy of troops beginning another day of training and operations. The sight filled Elena with familiar satisfaction, the recognition of military professionals preparing to execute their duties with competence and dedication. Alpha Company's headquarters occupied a portion of Building 742 that had been constructed during the base expansion of the 1980s, its architecture reflecting the functional priorities of military construction rather than aesthetic considerations. Elena noted the building's solid construction and practical layout, designed to house the administrative and operational functions that kept an infantry company effective and mission-ready. American flags and unit guidance hung from standardized mounting points, their colors vivid against the gray concrete of the building's facade. The company area bustled with activity as Elena approached, soldiers moving between buildings with the controlled urgency that marked military morning routines. She observed their interactions and bearing, reading the subtle indicators that revealed unit morale and leadership effectiveness. The troops appeared alert and purposeful, their uniforms and equipment maintained to appropriate standards, suggesting competent leadership and established discipline within the company structure. Master Sergeant Patricia Williams stood near the company headquarters entrance, her presence commanding immediate respect from the soldiers moving through the area. Elena recognized the first sergeant's authority through her bearing and the automatic deference shown by passing troops, the kind of professional respect that effective non-commissioned officers earn through competence and consistent leadership. Williams appeared to be conducting informal inspections and guidance, addressing minor issues before they could develop into larger problems. Elena approached with appropriate military bearing, coming to attention at the prescribed distance before addressing the senior non-commissioned officer. Master Sergeant Williams, Captain Rodriguez reporting as the new company executive officer. Her voice carried the formal respect required by military protocol while conveying professional confidence, appropriate for her role in the company leadership structure. Williams turned toward Elena with the measured assessment that experienced first sergeants applied to new officers joining their units. Her eyes held the intelligence and wariness that came from years of evaluating leaders and determining their likely impact on soldier welfare and mission effectiveness. Elena noted the first sergeant's careful examination, understanding that this initial interaction would significantly influence her acceptance within the company's leadership team. "Welcome to Alpha Company, Captain Rodriguez," Williams replied with professional courtesy that contained undertones of reserved judgment. "Captain Foster is conducting pre-exercise briefings with the platoon leaders in the conference room. He's expecting you to join the session once you've completed initial check-in procedures." The first sergeant's tone remained neutral, though. Elena detected subtle indicators suggesting that Williams had already formed preliminary opinions about the leadership change. Elena nodded her acknowledgement while making mental notes about the ongoing activities and the first sergeant's manner of presentation. Williams clearly maintained high standards for military courtesy and protocol, though her reserved demeanor suggested that trust and confidence would need to be earned through demonstrated competence rather than granted based on rank alone. Elena appreciated such professionalism, recognizing that effective first sergeants served as crucial bridges between commissioned leadership and enlisted personnel. "Master Sergeant, I'd appreciate your assessment of the company's current readiness status and any particular challenges or opportunities I should understand as I integrate into the leadership team," Elena said, her request framed to acknowledge Williams' expertise while seeking essential information for effective executive officer performance. She understood that first sergeants possessed institutional knowledge and soldier insights that were invaluable for new officers joining established units. Williams' expression shifted slightly, revealing what Elena interpreted as approval for her approach to seeking guidance rather than assuming immediate authority. "The company is solid, ma'am. Good soldiers, strong platoon sergeants, clear mission focus. We've had some personnel turbulence recently with officer rotations, but the troops have maintained standards throughout the transitions." Her assessment carried the measured tone of a senior non-commissioned officer, providing professional evaluation without revealing inappropriate details. Elena appreciated the first sergeant's balanced presentation, recognizing both the positive elements and the subtle acknowledgement of recent leadership changes that might have affected unit stability. Personnel turbulence was common in military organizations, though the specific circumstances and their impact on unit effectiveness would require careful observation and assessment. She filed away Williams' comments as baseline information for her own evaluation of company dynamics. "I look forward to working with you and supporting Captain Foster's command priorities," Elena responded with sincere professional commitment. "Please don't hesitate to provide feedback or guidance as I learn the company's specific procedures and operational requirements." Effective partnership between the executive officer and first sergeant is essential for mission success and soldier welfare. Williams nodded with what Elena interpreted as cautious approval, though she maintained the professional reserve appropriate for initial interactions between newly introduced leaders. "Captain Foster is expecting you in conference room B, ma'am. The platoon leaders should have completed their individual briefings by now, and the commander wanted to introduce you during the collective planning session for today's training exercise." Elena thanked the first sergeant and made her way toward the conference room, passing through corridors lined with unit photographs, training certificates, and motivational displays that reflected Alpha Company's history and achievements. The walls told stories of deployments and exercises, of soldiers who had served with distinction and missions accomplished under challenging conditions. Elena studied these displays with professional interest, gathering insights into the unit's culture and operational experience. Conference Room B occupied a central location within the company headquarters, its configuration optimized for briefings and planning sessions rather than comfort or aesthetics. Elena paused outside the closed door, hearing the familiar sounds of military planning in progress, voices discussing logistics and coordination, the rustle of maps and documents, the subtle tension that accompanied operational preparation. She knocked once and entered upon hearing Captain Foster's invitation. The scene inside the conference room immediately conveyed the professional competence that Elena had expected based on her preliminary research. Captain Michael Foster stood at the front of the room beside a large tactical map, his manner displaying the confident authority of an experienced infantry officer addressing his subordinate leaders. 3 platoon leaders occupied chairs arranged in a semicircle, their attention focused on their commander while notebooks and tactical documents covered the table surface. Foster appeared to be in his early 30s, his physical condition reflecting the fitness standards expected of infantry officers, while his bearing suggested comfort with command responsibility. Elena noted his direct manner of communication and the attentive responses from his platoon leaders, indicators of effective leadership and unit cohesion. The briefing materials visible on the table appeared comprehensive and professionally prepared, suggesting thorough planning for the scheduled training exercise. "Gentlemen, our new executive officer has arrived," Foster announced, his voice carrying welcome mixed with the formal recognition appropriate for introducing a new member of the command team. "Captain Elena Rodriguez comes to us from Fort Leavenworth, with distinguished academic credentials and varied operational experience. I expect her to contribute significantly to our training effectiveness and mission readiness." Elena stepped forward with appropriate military bearing, acknowledging the introduction while quickly assessing the assembled platoon leaders. First Lieutenant David Chen commanded 1st Platoon, his youthful appearance balanced by alert intelligence and professional demeanor. First Lieutenant Marcus Thompson led 2nd Platoon, his weathered features suggesting extensive field experience despite his relatively junior rank. 2nd Lieutenant Jessica Park commanded 3rd Platoon, her recent commissioning evident in her careful attention to protocol and procedure. "Thank you, Captain Foster," Elena responded with professional courtesy. "I'm honored to join Alpha Company and look forward to supporting your leadership and the outstanding soldiers I've observed this morning. Please continue with your briefing. I'll integrate my questions and observations as appropriate without disrupting your planned agenda." Foster nodded his appreciation for her diplomatic approach, before returning attention to the tactical situation displayed on the map. "As we were discussing, today's exercise will test our ability to conduct coordinated defensive operations under simulated combat conditions. The scenario involves defending Hill 394 against a mechanized assault while maintaining communications with higher headquarters and supporting elements." Elena studied the tactical display with professional interest, noting the terrain features, defensive positions, and coordination requirements that would challenge the company during the exercise. Hill 394 appeared to offer both advantages and vulnerabilities, its elevated position providing observation and fields of fire, while potentially limiting maneuver options and supply accessibility. The scenario would test multiple aspects of infantry operations while requiring effective leadership and coordination among all company elements. Opposition forces will include elements from Charlie Company, augmented by armor support and close air support simulation. Foster continued his briefing, covering the complexity factors that would stress the unit during the exercise. Weather conditions remain favorable following last night's storm, though ground conditions may affect movement and vehicle operations in certain areas. First Lieutenant Chen raised his hand with a question about ammunition allocation and resupply. Procedures, demonstrating the kind of detailed planning attention that Elena valued in subordinate leaders. Foster's response revealed thorough preparation and consideration of logistical factors that could affect mission success, while his manner of addressing Chen's concerns showed respect for his platoon leader's expertise and initiative. Elena observed the interaction dynamics between Foster and his platoon leaders, noting the professional relationships that had developed within the company's leadership team. The platoon leaders appeared comfortable presenting questions and concerns, while Foster demonstrated confidence in their competence and judgment. Such relationships were essential for effective operations, though Elena recognized that her integration into this established dynamic would require careful attention and diplomatic skill. Captain Rodriguez, do you have initial observations or questions about our planned operations? Foster asked, his tone indicating genuine interest in her perspective while acknowledging her role as executive officer. Elena appreciated his inclusive approach, recognizing that effective commanders utilized all available expertise and experience when planning complex operations. The defensive plan appears sound, with good utilization of terrain advantages and clear coordination procedures. Elena responded after studying the tactical display more carefully. I'm curious about your contingency plans for potential breakthrough scenarios and the procedures for coordinating withdrawal to alternate positions if the primary defensive line becomes untenable. Her question reflected professional military education and operational experience, focusing on contingency planning aspects that separated competent officers from exceptional ones. Foster's expression showed appreciation for her tactical thinking, while the platoon leaders demonstrated increased attention to her contributions. Elena noted their responses as indicators of the respect she would need to earn through continued demonstration of professional competence. Excellent question, Foster replied, moving to indicate alternate positions on the tactical map. We've identified 3 successive defensive lines with predetermined withdrawal routes and rally points. Each platoon has specific responsibilities for covering movement and maintaining communications during any retrograde operations. The key will be maintaining unit cohesion while executing coordinated withdrawal under pressure. Elena nodded her understanding while studying the alternate positions and withdrawal routes that Foster indicated. The planning appeared thorough and realistic, accounting for the likelihood that defensive operations might require flexibility and adaptation as situations developed. She made mental notes about coordination requirements and potential stress points that could affect execution during the actual exercise. The briefing continued with detailed discussion of communications procedures, medical evacuation plans, and coordination with supporting elements. Elena observed how Foster managed the planning session, noting his balance between maintaining control and encouraging input from subordinate leaders. The platoon leaders demonstrated competence and initiative, asking relevant questions and offering practical suggestions based on their understanding of their troops' capabilities. As the formal briefing concluded, Foster assigned specific preparation tasks to each platoon leader while establishing timeline checkpoints for readiness reporting. Elena appreciated his systematic approach to exercise preparation, recognizing the attention to detail that would contribute to both training effectiveness and soldier safety during operations. The platoon leaders accepted their assignments with professional acknowledgement before departing to conduct their own unit preparations. Captain Rodriguez, if you have a few minutes, I'd like to discuss your specific role during today's exercise and our general approach to executive officer responsibilities within the company, Foster said as the conference room emptied. Elena welcomed the opportunity for private discussion, understanding that effective working relationships between commanders and executive officers required clear communication and mutual understanding of expectations. Foster's manner remained professionally cordial as they settled into chairs around the conference table, though Elena detected subtle undertones suggesting that her assignment might involve complexities beyond routine personnel management. She maintained attentive focus while preparing to gather essential information about her role and responsibilities within Alpha Company's operational structure. Elena, I'll be direct with you because I believe honest communication is essential for effective leadership partnership. Foster began, his tone carrying seriousness that indicated the conversation would address significant issues. Colonel Harrison has made his expectations very clear regarding women in leadership positions within this battalion. He believes female officers lack the physical and mental capabilities required for combat operations, and he's watching closely for evidence to support his theories. Elena maintained professional composure while processing Foster's revelation, though she felt familiar tension building in response to institutional prejudice that she had encountered throughout her military career. Harrison's attitude represented outdated thinking that contradicted both policy and operational reality, yet such perspectives persisted in certain military environments, despite official changes in regulations and procedures. I appreciate your candor, Captain Foster, Elena responded with measured professionalism. I've encountered similar attitudes previously in my career, and I've learned that performance speaks more effectively than argument in addressing such concerns. My focus will be on contributing to Alpha Company's mission, effectiveness, and supporting your command priorities through competent execution of executive officer responsibilities. Foster nodded with what Elena interpreted as relief at her mature response to a potentially volatile situation. That's exactly the approach I was hoping to hear. Your credentials suggest extensive capability, and I need an executive officer who can handle complex responsibilities without being distracted by political considerations. This company deserves leadership that prioritizes mission accomplishment and soldier welfare above personal agendas. Elena appreciated Foster's professional priorities while recognizing that navigating Harrison's prejudices would require careful attention to both performance and perception. Military organizations operated on the basis of evaluation and reputation, both of which could be influenced by subjective factors beyond pure competence. She would need to demonstrate exceptional capability while avoiding actions that could be misinterpreted or used to support Harrison's predetermined conclusions. What specific challenges should I anticipate, and how can I best support your leadership while managing the broader command climate issues you've described? Elena asked, seeking practical guidance for operating effectively within the constraints that Harrison's attitude would impose on her performance evaluation. Foster considered his response carefully, his expression suggesting that he was weighing various factors and potential complications. Harrison will be observing today's exercise personally, looking for evidence to support his theories about female leadership limitations. He's particularly focused on crisis management and decision-making under pressure, areas where he believes women will demonstrate inadequate performance when faced with realistic combat stress. Elena filed away this information as essential intelligence for her performance during the day's activities. Harrison's presence would add pressure beyond normal training exercise dynamics, requiring her to maintain exceptional performance standards while avoiding any appearance of hesitation or uncertainty. She had operated under such scrutiny before. Though each situation brought unique challenges and requirements, I understand the situation, Captain Foster. My performance will reflect the training and experience that brought me to this assignment. I'm confident in my abilities while remaining appropriately focused on supporting your command and serving Alpha Company soldiers to the best of my capability. Elena's response conveyed professional confidence without arrogance, acknowledging the challenges while affirming her commitment to excellence. Foster's expression showed satisfaction with her attitude and approach. Outstanding. Now, regarding your specific responsibilities during today's exercise, you'll be managing communications, coordination with higher headquarters and supporting elements, while monitoring logistic status and contingency, planning implementation. It's a complex role that requires constant situation awareness and rapid decision-making when circumstances change. Elena nodded her understanding while mentally preparing for the multifaceted responsibilities that Foster had outlined. Executive officer duties during training exercises often involved managing multiple simultaneous requirements while maintaining overall situation awareness, skills that demanded both technical competence and leadership judgment. She welcomed the challenge while recognizing the additional pressure created by Harrison's anticipated scrutiny. "I've reviewed the communications plan and logistics requirements," Elena confirmed. "I'll coordinate with Master Sergeant Williams to ensure all support functions are properly integrated with operational activities. Is there anything specific about Alpha Company's procedures or capabilities that would be helpful for me to understand before we begin operations?" Foster smiled with what Elena interpreted as genuine appreciation for her thorough preparation. "You've clearly done your homework, which is exactly what I hope to see. The key thing to understand about Alpha Company is that our soldiers are exceptionally capable, but they've been through several leadership changes recently. They're watching to see if new leaders will support them effectively or create additional complications through poor judgment or inadequate competence." Elena understood the implicit message about earning the trust and confidence of Alpha Companies soldiers through demonstrated performance rather than assumed authority. Military personnel, particularly experienced soldiers, evaluated leaders based on competence and commitment to their welfare rather than rank or formal position. She had learned throughout her career that effective leadership required proving oneself worthy of followership through consistent professional excellence. "I understand completely," Elena responded with sincere commitment. "My priority is supporting these soldiers and contributing to their success during training and operations. Everything else is secondary to mission accomplishment and troop welfare." Foster stood from the conference table with evident satisfaction at their conversation. "Excellent. Let's get you equipped and integrated with the command post team. We'll be establishing our Tactical Operations Center in approximately 30 minutes, and I want you familiar with all systems and procedures before the exercise begins officially." Elena followed Foster from the conference room toward the equipment storage area where her tactical gear and communications equipment waited. The company headquarters buzzed with pre-exercise activity as soldiers completed final preparations and conducted equipment checks. Elena observed the controlled urgency that marked professional military operations, noting the competence and dedication evident in Alpha Company's personnel. Master Sergeant Williams approached as they reached the equipment area, her arms carrying tactical gear and communications equipment configured for executive officer requirements. "Captain Rodriguez, I've prepared your equipment based on the standard executive officer load plan, with modifications for today's specific communications and coordination requirements. The radio is programmed with all relevant frequencies, and I've included backup batteries and antenna configurations for extended operations." Elena accepted the equipment with appreciation for Williams' thorough preparation. The gear reflected professional attention to detail and understanding of executive officer responsibilities during field operations. She conducted rapid inspection of the equipment while mentally reviewing communications procedures and coordination requirements that would be essential for effective performance during the exercise. "Thank you, Master Sergeant Williams. This appears complete and properly configured. I'll conduct final communications checks once we establish the Tactical Operations Center." Elena's response acknowledged the first sergeant's competence while indicating her own familiarity with equipment requirements and operational procedures. The next 20 minutes passed quickly as Elena completed equipment preparation and received briefings on Alpha Company-specific tactical procedures and communication protocols. Foster introduced her to key personnel within the command post team, including the communications specialist, logistics coordinator, and medical liaison who would support command and control functions during the exercise. Staff Sergeant Michael Davis served as the primary communications specialist, his expertise essential for maintaining connectivity with higher headquarters and supporting elements throughout the exercise. Elena noted his professional competence and attention to detail, recognizing that effective communications would be crucial for successful coordination of the complex defensive operations that Foster had planned. Sergeant First Class Amanda Torres managed logistics coordination, her responsibilities including ammunition supply, medical evacuation procedures, and equipment maintenance support during extended operations. Elena observed Torres' systematic approach to logistics planning, appreciating the thorough preparation that would enable sustained operations without supply-related mission degradation. Corpsman Second Class Robert Kim provided medical support and casualty evacuation coordination, his role becoming critical if realistic training resulted in injuries or medical emergencies. Elena noted Kim's professional medical equipment and calm demeanor, indicators of competence that would be essential if real medical situations developed during the exercise. As Alpha Company completed final preparations and moved toward their assigned positions on Hill 394, Elena felt the familiar anticipation that preceded military operations. The combination of professional challenge and leadership responsibility created an environment where competence mattered more than rhetoric, where performance would be measured against objective standards rather than subjective preferences. Colonel Harrison's vehicle appeared on the horizon as Alpha Company established their defensive positions, the command group's arrival adding formal observation and evaluation to the training scenario. Elena noted Harrison's presence while maintaining focus on her executive officer responsibilities, understanding that her performance would be assessed by multiple audiences with different expectations and motivations. The Tactical Operations Center took shape rapidly as the command post team implemented their rehearsed procedures for establishing communications and coordination capabilities. Elena integrated smoothly into the operation, her movements and decision-making, reflecting the professional competence that Foster had hoped to see from his new executive officer. Romeo 6, this is Alpha 6. Command post established and operational. Over. Foster transmitted to battalion headquarters, his voice carrying the controlled professionalism that marked effective military communications. Elena monitored the radio traffic while maintaining situational awareness of the defensive preparations being completed by Alpha Company's 3 platoons. Alpha 6, Romeo 6, Roger your transmission. Exercise will commence in 15 minutes. Opposition forces are approaching your sector from the northeast. Maintain communication schedule and report all significant developments. Over, came the response from battalion headquarters, confirming that the training scenario would begin shortly. Elena updated her status boards and communication logs while coordinating with the supporting elements that Foster had requested for the defensive operation. Artillery support was available on call. Medical evacuation was standing by, and supply vehicles were positioned to respond to logistics requirements. The coordination required constant attention and rapid decision-making as various elements reported their readiness status. Captain Rodriguez, opposition forces have been identified approaching from grid coordinates 185,432. Staff Sergeant Davis reported, his voice carrying the urgency appropriate for tactical situations. Elena plotted the location on her tactical map while calculating the timing and approach routes that enemy forces would likely utilize in their assault on Hill 394. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Davis. Captain Foster, enemy forces approximately 20 minutes from contact based on observed movement and terrain factors. Recommend final defensive preparations and weapons systems checks. Elena reported to her commander. Her assessment based on tactical analysis and operational experience that enabled accurate predictions about timing and enemy capabilities. Foster nodded his acknowledgement while issuing final instructions to his platoon leaders through the tactical radio network. Elena observed his command style under pressure, noting his calm demeanor and clear communication that would be essential for effective leadership during the simulated combat operations. The exercise was about to test Alpha Company's capabilities and her own performance as executive officer under the scrutiny of higher headquarters evaluation. All stations, this is Alpha 6. Exercise commences now. Report all enemy contact and maintain communication discipline. Execute according to plan and adapt as situations develop. Out, Foster transmitted, his words marking the beginning of operations that would challenge every aspect of Alpha Company's training and preparation. Elena shifted into combat operations mode, her attention focused on the multiple coordination requirements that would determine Alpha Company's success during the simulated battle. Communications traffic increased immediately as reconnaissance elements reported enemy movement and defensive positions confirmed their readiness for contact. The executive officer role demanded constant situation awareness and rapid response to changing tactical requirements. Alpha 6, Alpha 1, enemy armor identified in strength approaching our sector. Request immediate artillery support on target reference point 37. First Lieutenant Chun transmitted from 1st Platoon's position, his voice carrying controlled urgency appropriate for tactical communications under simulated combat. Stress. Elena immediately began coordinating artillery support while maintaining awareness of other developing situations across Alpha Company's defensive sector. The communications requirements demanded rapid processing of information and precise coordination with multiple supporting elements, skills that were being tested under realistic operational pressure. Fire Direction Center. This is Alpha Operations. Requesting immediate suppression mission on target reference point 37. Infantry and armor in the open. Over. Elena transmitted to the Artillery Coordination Center, her voice carrying the professional competence required for effective fire support coordination during tactical operations. Alpha Operations Fire Direction Center, shot on the way. Estimated time of flight 45 seconds. Danger close to your positions. Over. Came the rapid response from artillery support, confirming that fire support was inbound to engage the enemy forces approaching Alpha Company's defensive positions. Elena coordinated the artillery impact timing with Alpha Company's defensive fires while monitoring communications traffic from all 3 platoons as they engaged enemy forces simultaneously. The tactical situation developed rapidly, requiring constant adjustments and coordination to maintain effective defensive operations against a determined enemy assault. Colonel Harrison's command vehicle had positioned itself on elevated ground overlooking Alpha Company's defensive positions, its occupants clearly observing the tactical operations through binoculars and tactical radio monitoring. Elena remained focused on her coordination responsibilities while maintaining peripheral awareness of the evaluation and assessment being conducted by Battalion headquarters. Alpha 6, Alpha 2, we have enemy breakthrough in Sector 2-4. Request immediate reinforcement and medical evacuation for 3 casualties. 2nd Lieutenant Thompson transmitted, his report indicating that Alpha Company's defensive plan was being severely tested by effective enemy assault operations. Elena immediately began coordinating reinforcement and medical evacuation, while updating Foster on the tactical situation development that threatened Alpha Company's defensive integrity. The executive officer role required rapid decision-making and effective coordination of multiple simultaneous requirements under extreme time pressure. Captain Foster, Alpha 2 reports breakthrough in Sector 2-4 with 3 casualties requiring immediate medical evacuation. I'm coordinating reinforcement from Battalion Reserve and medical evacuation through the established procedures. Elena reported while simultaneously managing radio communications with multiple supporting elements. Foster's response reflected his confidence in Elena's coordination abilities while he focused on tactical command, decisions required to maintain Alpha Company's defensive effectiveness. Outstanding, Elena. Coordinate whatever support they need. I'm repositioning Alpha 3 to reinforce that sector and maintain our overall defensive integrity. Elena coordinated the complex logistics of medical evacuation while facilitating reinforcement movement and maintaining communications with higher headquarters about Alpha Company's tactical situation. The coordination demanded technical expertise and leadership judgment while operating under realistic combat stress that tested both individual and unit capabilities. The simulation continued for another hour with increasing intensity as enemy forces pressed their assault against Alpha Company's defensive positions. Elena's performance during the complex coordination requirements had been flawless, her decision-making and communication reflecting the professional competence that Foster had hoped to see from his executive officer. As the exercise concluded, with successful defense of Hill 394 despite significant challenges, Colonel Harrison's command vehicle approached Alpha Company's Tactical Operations Center for post-exercise evaluation and assessment. Elena prepared for the scrutiny that would determine Harrison's impression of her performance and capabilities as a female officer in a combat leadership role. Colonel Harrison stepped from his command vehicle with the measured authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any gathering. His polished boots reflected the afternoon sun as he approached Alpha Company's Tactical Operations Center, clipboard in hand and expression set in the neutral mask that senior officers wore when conducting formal evaluations. Elena continued coordinating post-exercise accountability reports while maintaining peripheral awareness of Harrison's approach. Captain Foster, assemble your leadership team for immediate after-action review, Harrison announced, his voice carrying the expectation of immediate compliance that marked his command style. Elena noted the subtle tension that rippled through the command post as soldiers recognized the formality of Harrison's demeanor and prepared for what appeared to be a comprehensive evaluation session. Foster acknowledged the directive with professional courtesy while signaling Elena and the platoon leaders to join the impromptu briefing circle that Harrison was establishing near the Tactical Operations Center. Elena secured her communications equipment and coordination materials before moving to join the group, her movements reflecting calm professionalism despite the obvious intensity of Harrison's scrutinizing attention. Captain Rodriguez, your performance during this exercise raises several concerns about executive officer capabilities under combat stress. Harrison began without preamble, directing his attention toward Elena with the focused intensity of a prosecutor presenting evidence. Your radio procedures demonstrated excessive hesitation during critical coordination requirements, and your decision-making process appeared to lack the decisive authority required for effective combat operations. Elena maintained professional composure while processing Harrison's assessment, which contradicted both her own evaluation of her performance and the positive feedback she had received from Foster during the exercise. Harrison's critique appeared to be based on predetermined conclusions rather than objective observation, though she understood that challenging his assessment directly would likely prove counterproductive. Sir, could you provide specific examples of the hesitation and decision-making deficiencies you observed? Elena requested with respectful professionalism, seeking clarification that might reveal the basis for Harrison's negative evaluation while avoiding confrontational language that could escalate the situation unnecessarily. Harrison's expression hardened at her request for specificity, his demeanor suggesting that he interpreted her question as inappropriate challenge to his authority, rather than legitimate seeking of constructive feedback. Captain Rodriguez, your tone and approach demonstrate exactly the kind of defensive attitude that undermines effective military leadership. Female officers consistently prioritize self-justification over mission focus when faced with professional criticism. Foster shifted uncomfortably at Harrison's increasingly personal attack, his expression indicating disagreement with both the content and approach of his superior's evaluation. Elena noted Foster's reaction while maintaining her own professional composure, understanding that any emotional response would likely be interpreted as validation of Harrison's predetermined conclusions about female leadership capabilities. Colonel, with respect, Captain Rodriguez's performance during today's exercise was exceptional, Foster interjected with carefully controlled professionalism. Her coordination of artillery support, medical evacuation, and reinforcement logistics was flawless under extreme time pressure. The successful defense of our position was significantly enabled by her tactical competence and communication effectiveness. Harrison turned toward Foster with the dangerous calm that senior officers displayed when subordinates questioned their judgment. Captain Foster, your assessment appears to be influenced by political considerations rather than objective military standards. Captain Rodriguez's performance demonstrated the fundamental limitations that female officers bring to combat operations, regardless of their technical qualifications or academic credentials. Elena watched the exchange between Foster and Harrison, while calculating the professional risks that Foster was accepting by defending her performance. Military careers could be significantly impacted by conflicts with senior officers, particularly when those conflicts involved sensitive political issues like gender integration in combat roles. Foster's willingness to challenge Harrison's assessment demonstrated professional courage and commitment to accurate evaluation. Sir, my assessment is based solely on observed performance during tactically realistic operations, Foster replied. With quiet firmness, Captain Rodriguez demonstrated superior competence in every aspect of executive officer responsibilities. Her technical expertise and leadership judgment were instrumental in mission success under challenging conditions. Harrison's face reddened with the controlled anger of someone unaccustomed to having his judgment questioned by subordinates. Captain Foster, your defense of Captain Rodriguez reveals the kind of compromised judgment that occurs when political correctness overrides military necessity. Female officers require special accommodation and generate protective responses that undermine objective evaluation and unit effectiveness. Elena felt familiar frustration building at Harrison's intractable prejudice, though she maintained professional control while observing the interaction between her commander and the battalion leader. Harrison's attitude represented institutional resistance to change that persisted despite official policy modifications and overwhelming evidence of female competence in military operations. Colonel Harrison, I respectfully request that you evaluate my performance based on observed actions rather than predetermined assumptions about gender-based limitations, Elena said with measured professionalism, choosing to address the situation directly rather than allowing Harrison's prejudices to go unchallenged. My coordination effectiveness and decision-making during today's exercise can be verified through objective review of communications logs and tactical outcomes. Harrison's attention snapped toward Elena with laser intensity, his expression revealing the satisfaction of someone who had been provided with exactly the response he had been seeking. Captain Rodriguez, your confrontational attitude and inability to accept constructive criticism demonstrate precisely the kind of emotional instability that makes female officers unsuitable for combat leadership positions. Real soldiers accept evaluation without defensive justification. Elena recognized that Harrison had manipulated the conversation to create the confrontational dynamic that would support his pre-existing conclusions, regardless of her actual performance or professional demeanor. His approach reflected the systematic prejudice that she had encountered throughout her military career, though rarely expressed so openly by senior officers in official settings. Master Sergeant Williams approached the group with purposeful strides, her expression carrying the focused intensity that experienced first sergeants displayed when addressing situations that affected unit welfare. Elena noted Williams' approach while wondering what additional complication was about to be introduced into an already tense evaluation session. "Colonel Harrison, there's a priority communication for you from Division Headquarters," Williams announced with the professional urgency that marked important official communications. She extended a secure radio handset toward Harrison, while maintaining the respectful distance appropriate for interactions with senior officers during formal situations. Harrison accepted the communication with evident irritation at the interruption, though his demeanor shifted immediately as he listened to the voice on the other end of the secure connection. Elena observed his expression change from annoyance to surprise, then to something approaching concern as the conversation continued with increasing intensity. "Understood, sir. Yes, sir. She's here now. I'll stand by for further instructions," Harrison concluded before ending the communication and returning the handset to Williams. His manner had transformed completely, the confident authority replaced by visible uncertainty and what Elena interpreted as growing apprehension about unknown complications. "Captain Rodriguez, Division Headquarters requires your immediate presence for classified briefing regarding urgent operational requirements," Harrison announced, his voice carrying forced neutrality that barely concealed his confusion about the unexpected development. "You're to report immediately with full tactical gear and prepared for extended deployment." Elena maintained professional composure while processing the unexpected summons, though she felt familiar tension building as classified operational requirements suggested the kind of mission assignment that had characterized significant portions of her military career. Such communications rarely occurred during routine training periods, unless genuine emergencies had developed requiring specialized capabilities. "Sir, do you have additional details about the operational requirements or deployment timeline?" Elena asked with appropriate military courtesy, seeking information that would help her prepare for whatever mission had prompted the urgent communication from Division Headquarters. Harrison's expression revealed his frustration with being excluded from information loop involving his own subordinate officer. "Captain Rodriguez, I have no additional information beyond what I've communicated. Division Headquarters will provide complete briefing upon your arrival. Report immediately and maintain operational security regarding this communication." Elena acknowledged the instructions while noting Harrison's obvious discomfort with the situation that had removed his control over evaluation and assignment of his subordinate officer. The intervention by higher headquarters had effectively ended his critique of her performance while introducing elements that clearly extended beyond normal battalion operations. Foster approached Elena as she prepared to depart for Division Headquarters, his expression showing concern mixed with professional curiosity about the unexpected development. "Elena, I don't know what this is about, but I want you to know that your performance today was outstanding. Whatever division needs from you, Alpha Company stands ready to support." Elena appreciated Foster's continued confidence and support, recognizing that his assessment of her capabilities would be important for her future effectiveness within the battalion structure. "Thank you, Captain Foster. I've enjoyed working with Alpha Company, and I hope to continue contributing to the unit's mission effectiveness when operational requirements permit." The drive to Division Headquarters provided Elena with time to consider the possible reasons for the urgent summons and to prepare mentally for whatever briefing awaited her arrival. Classified operational requirements could involve various scenarios, though the timing and urgency suggested significant developments requiring immediate response from personnel with specialized capabilities. Division Headquarters occupied a sprawling complex of modern buildings designed to house the command and control functions required for managing large-scale military operations. Elena noted the increased security presence and heightened activity levels that suggested elevated Operational tempo beyond normal garrison routine. Major General Patricia Walsh waited in the secure briefing room, her presence indicating the significance of whatever operational development had prompted Elena's urgent summons. Elena recognized Walsh's reputation as a combat-experienced leader who had commanded forces in multiple theaters while advancing through increasingly responsible positions within the military hierarchy. Captain Rodriguez, thank you for responding immediately to our request. Walsh began with the professional courtesy that marked interactions between senior leaders and specialized personnel. I'll be direct about why you're here. We have a developing situation in Syria that requires your specific expertise and operational background. Elena maintained professional composure while feeling familiar anticipation building as classified operations beckoned once again. Walsh's reference to her specific expertise suggested that her classified operational history had been reviewed and deemed relevant to current requirements, though the exact nature of the mission remained unclear. Ma'am, I'm prepared to support whatever operational requirements you determine appropriate for my capabilities and experience. Elena responded with professional commitment, while internally preparing for the kind of deployment that had characterized significant portions of her military career. Walsh activated a secure briefing display showing tactical maps and intelligence photographs from Middle Eastern operational theaters. Captain Rodriguez, 3 weeks ago we lost contact with a special operations team conducting classified reconnaissance in northern Syria. Intelligence indicates they're being held by a hostile force that has demonstrated sophisticated tactical capabilities and advanced weapons systems. Elena studied the displayed information while processing the implications of a missing special operations team and the specialized rescue mission that would likely be required for their recovery. Such operations demanded precise planning and execution by personnel with extensive experience in hostile territory operations and unconventional warfare techniques. The terrain and enemy capabilities require a rescue force commander with specific qualifications that are extremely rare within our current personnel inventory. Walsh continued, her tone indicating that Elena's background had been identified as matching those requirements. Your classified operational record indicates capabilities that make you uniquely qualified to plan and execute this type of mission. Elena felt the weight of professional responsibility settling upon her as the briefing continued with increasingly detailed intelligence about enemy capabilities and operational constraints. The mission would require the kind of leadership and tactical expertise that she had developed through years of classified operations in similar environments. Captain Rodriguez, I need to know if you're prepared to assume command of a joint special operations rescue mission with complete operational authority and responsibility for mission success. Walsh concluded, her words carrying the gravity that accompanied life and death decisions about American personnel in hostile territory. Elena met Walsh's gaze with steady professionalism, while considering the magnitude of the responsibility being offered and the professional transformation it would represent. Ma'am, I accept the mission and the command responsibility. When do we deploy? 3 months later, Colonel Harrison stood frozen in his office as CNN broadcast footage that shattered every assumption he had ever held about military leadership. The screen showed grainy helicopter footage of a daring nighttime rescue operation in northern Syria, where American Special Operations Forces had successfully extracted a captured reconnaissance team from a heavily fortified compound. The mission commander's voice crackled through the audio feed, calm and precise despite coordinating simultaneous helicopter landings, ground assault elements, and close air support strikes. Harrison's hands trembled as he recognized that steady, professional tone, the same voice he had dismissed as emotionally unstable just months before. Lightning 6, this is Viper Actual. All packages secured, extraction complete. Minimal casualties. Mission success. came Elena Rodriguez's transmission as the rescue helicopters disappeared into the darkness over hostile territory. The news anchor's voice filled Harrison's office with words that seemed impossible. The mission commander, Army Captain Elena Rodriguez, led the joint task force that successfully recovered all 7 missing Special Operations personnel after 3 months in enemy captivity. Sources indicate Rodriguez's tactical brilliance and leadership, under extreme pressure, were instrumental in what military experts are calling one of the most successful rescue operations in recent military history. Harrison collapsed into his desk chair as the report continued, revealing details that destroyed his carefully constructed worldview piece by piece. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just another female officer struggling to meet military standards. She was a decorated Special Operations veteran with multiple classified deployments, an expert in unconventional warfare whose true service record had been hidden by operational security requirements. The television screen displayed her official photograph, the same face that Harrison had dismissed as lacking the killer instinct required for real warfare. But the accompanying text told a different story. Bronze Star with V device for valor. In Afghanistan, Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Ranger qualified. Airborne qualified. Special Operations Forces veteran with 7 years of classified operational experience. Staff Sergeant Chun knocked tentatively on Harrison's door before entering with a priority message from division headquarters. Her expression carried the careful neutrality of someone delivering news that would fundamentally alter established power dynamics within the battalion structure. Sir, Captain Rodriguez has been promoted to Major and reassigned as the new battalion executive officer. She reports for duty Monday morning, Chun announced, her voice maintaining professional composure despite the obvious implications of the personnel change. Harrison stared at the message without comprehension, his mind struggling to process how completely he had misjudged the situation. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just returning to Fort Braxton, she was returning as his direct subordinate in a position of significant authority and influence over battalion operations. The following Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of perfect weather that seemed to mock Harrison's internal turmoil. He stood at his office window watching Elena's vehicle approach the battalion headquarters, her arrival marking the beginning of a new chapter in his military career. Elena entered his office with the same measured professionalism she had displayed months earlier, though her bearing now reflected the confidence of someone whose capabilities had been tested and validated at the highest levels of military operations. Her new major's rank gleamed on her uniform, a tangible reminder of the promotion that Harrison's superiors had deemed appropriate recognition for exceptional service. Colonel Harrison, Major Rodriguez, reporting for duty as battalion executive officer, she announced with crisp military bearing, her voice carrying the same steady professionalism that had guided Special Operations Forces through hostile territory and brought American soldiers home alive. Harrison returned her salute with mechanical precision, though his movements lacked the confident authority that had once characterized his interactions with subordinate officers. The power dynamic had shifted fundamentally, and both officers understood that their professional relationship would be built on Elena's demonstrated competence rather than Harrison's assumed superiority. Major Rodriguez, welcome back to the battalion, Harrison managed, his voice carrying forced neutrality that barely concealed his uncertainty about how to navigate this transformed situation. I trust your operational deployment was successful. Elena's slight smile suggested she understood the complexity of Harrison's position while maintaining the professional courtesy required by military protocol. Yes, sir. Mission accomplished with all personnel accounted for. I'm prepared to assume executive officer responsibilities and support your command priorities for battalion operations. Over the following weeks, Elena's performance as battalion executive officer demonstrated the same exceptional competence that had characterized her rescue mission leadership. She transformed operational planning procedures improved coordination between companies, and established training standards that elevated the entire battalion's capabilities. Harrison watched her work with grudging recognition of abilities that far exceeded his own experience and expertise. Elena's leadership style combined tactical brilliance with genuine care for soldier welfare, creating an environment where subordinates thrived under her guidance and mentorship. The battalion's companies competed for assignments that would involve working directly with Elena, recognizing her as a leader who could teach them skills and approaches that would advance their own military careers. Officers and non-commissioned officers alike sought her guidance on complex operational problems, understanding that her expertise came from real-world experience in the most challenging military environments. Harrison's initial resistance gradually transformed into reluctant respect as Elena consistently demonstrated the professional excellence that had earned her promotion and recognition. Her gender, which he had once viewed as an insurmountable limitation, became irrelevant in the face of undeniable competence and proven leadership capability. 6 months after Elena's return, Harrison found himself defending female integration in combat roles during a conference with other senior officers, using examples from Elena's performance to argue for expanded opportunities for women in military leadership positions. The transformation was complete. The colonel who had once embodied institutional prejudice had become an advocate for merit-based evaluation, regardless of gender. Elena Rodriguez had achieved something far more significant than personal career advancement. Through quiet professionalism and exceptional performance, she had changed minds, opened doors, and created opportunities for future generations of military women who would face fewer barriers because of her example. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.